Uh, Tonight I want to talk about Teshuvah. In particular, I call it fixing the past. I want to start with two medium-sized introductory remarks, which I think will give a certain context for what we're talking about. When you talk about doing something wrong, and then you want to fix it up, strictly speaking, you think if it's in the past, you can't fix it up. You know, past is the past. The history is written already. So let's examine that just a little bit. What people tend to say is, you can't change the past. You can change the future, but you can't change the past, because the past is closed. Now that turns out to be wrong. That turns out to be wrong. It's just as impossible to change the future as it is to change the past. They're equal. Can't change either of them. So let's think for a minute. What does it mean to change something? They gave me a black box, but I don't like black. I like white, so I painted it white. I changed its color from black to white. That means when I change something from A to B, at one point in time it really was A, and then I made it B at another point in time. Being A doesn't disappear. Being A isn't wiped out. Being A isn't erased from history. On the contrary, it started out A, for who knows how long, hours, years, and then I painted it white, and now it's white. That's what it means to change something. To change something from A to B means at a certain point in time it was A, and then later it was B. I hope that's very obvious. Okay, now let's talk about changing tomorrow's weather. What would that mean? It would have to mean that at a certain point, tomorrow's weather really was rainy, and then I changed it into sunny. Did it rain the next day, or sunny the next day, or the world come to an end? What happened? If you say it rained from 8 a.m. to noon, and it was sunny from noon until 4 p.m., that's fine. But that means no particular event on the day was changed. It's just that we had rain in the morning and sun in the afternoon. What people talk about, when they talk about changing the future or changing the past, what they seem to mean is, well, the future is going to be a rain in the morning, and I'm going to change it into sunny in the morning. But if you do that, the rain in the morning is wiped out. It has nothing left. It's gone, erased. That's not what change is. To change something from A to B means at one point in time it really is A. And then at a later point in time, it really is B. So I'm going to say, tomorrow morning, at one point in time, was rainy. At a different point in time, tomorrow morning, was sunny. Tomorrow morning is a period of time. There's no period of time at another time. So you can't change the future any more than you can change the past. You can't have an event in the past. Okay, that's what history reads. That's what happened. And I'll change that event into something else. Well, what will be written in the history book? The history book is the history of facts that happen, events that happen. Which one goes in? To change would mean both of them go in, and they're competitors for the same piece of time, space-time. So you can't change the past or the future. This was very clearly explained by a physicist, which is rare, Brian Greene, in one of his books where he talked about time travel. And the old joke was, can you go back in time and shoot your grandfather before he has any children? My grandfather. That's going to be problematic, right? Because then how do I get into the picture? But who's stopping me? His point is only, what will you write in the history book? Did that grandfather live and get married and have children? Is that what's written in the history book? Or is that what's written in the history book? Yeah, both. It's only one history. You can't say, well, it was that he did get married, have children, so on and so on, and now I went back and changed the part where and killed him before he had children. The past has to read one way or the other. The past is a description of all the things that happened. Either he got married, had children, or he didn't. Can't have it both ways. So, changing the future is just as impossible as changing the past. The difference that people want to insist, which at least there's a Havamina, is that you can cause things to happen in the future. And you can't cause things to happen in the past. I say, if I don't sprinkle the clouds with dry ice seeds, it won't rain. If I do, it will. I'm not changing what happens, I'm determining what will happen. There's only one future, that future has only one event in it, and I can set it up which one happens. That's not the same as changing. That, you might say, although it's discussed and it's controversial, it's not obvious, that you might say, as a difference in the past and the future, you can cause things that happen in the future. You can't cause things that happen in the past because they've already happened. Okay, I'm not going to go into that anymore. That's one thing. Now, in Jewish law, there's a concept called lemafreya. Lemafreya means something you do now has an effect on an earlier event. That sounds suspicious. How could something you do now have an effect on an earlier event? Well, it can happen legally. If, for example, the person does something, and then he says, the validity of what I'm doing now depends upon what happens tomorrow. If it rains tomorrow, then what I'm doing now is legally binding. And if it doesn't rain tomorrow, then what happens now is not legally binding. You can do that. You can make a legal move, and you can make it dependent. What usually happens in law is something like this. This contract is valid, and you receive the property if you pay me $100,000 tomorrow. And if you don't, not. The sale is now. If you pay me the $100,000 tomorrow, then the sale now goes through. If you don't pay me the sale tomorrow, pay me the $100,000 tomorrow, then the sale today doesn't go through. So paying or not paying the money in the next day is what determines whether the previous day the sale goes through or doesn't go through. That's common in Jewish law. That's called the mafreya. What you do on the next day then either validates or invalidates what you did on the previous day. What you do on the later day has that effect on the previous day. Then there's something a little more subtle. Now you can tell it's the people with black hats. Some won't know, and some who do know will think very highly of you. There's something called mikan ulahava mafreya, where the effect is retroactive with consequences only from now, not from the prior time. Something happens now that has a consequence for something that happened 3 years ago, but the character of the thing 3 years ago, which is now established, only affects future history from now. It doesn't affect the intervening 3 years. I'll give you an example of how that works. Maybe some of you have heard of Adam Zomerman. You know what that is? No. Okay. Witnesses give testimony in court. They saw a crime. Now, you can challenge those witnesses two different ways. They say they saw a crime, a certain time and place. Somebody else says, I was that time, I was that place, it didn't happen. That's called simple contradiction. They say it happened, they say it didn't happen. That contradiction means you don't go anywhere. Second possibility, the first witnesses say, we saw the crime, that time and that place. And the second witnesses say, we don't know whether the crime happened or not. We weren't in that time and that place. So maybe it did, maybe it didn't, we have no opinion. But you, witnesses, can't say that it did because you weren't there. You were there someplace else. That's called Adam Zomerman. They don't contradict the event about which the first witnesses spoke. They contradict the validity of the first witnesses to say what they said because they weren't present. Now, Jewish law says that if the first witnesses testify to an event, and the second witnesses say that they were elsewhere at the time of the event that they gave testimony to, then we treat the first witnesses as guilty of lying, and we punish them. The obvious question that leaps to mind is, Why do you do that? Obviously, the ones who said they saw the event are saying that they were there. And these guys are saying they weren't there. Who knew? How do you know who's telling the truth? Either one could be lying. Yet, the Torah's law is that we accept the second pair, who said they weren't there, and we punish the first pair. Now, there's a disagreement among the commentators whether that law is logical or it isn't logical. Because can you figure out a logical reason why you should prefer the testimony of the second witnesses over the testimony of the first witnesses, even though you don't know who's lying? Or can you not? The argument,
It sounds like the first witnesses are silent in relation to the second set of witnesses, and silence is usually treated as admission, no?
Silent. Well, let's put it this way. It would be, except for the things that I'm coming up to say now. Is that not a bad idea? The one who says, well, let me do it step by step. When the first witnesses say, at Times Square, 3:05 a.m., January 5th, 2017, so-and-so killed so-and-so. We saw so-and-so kill so-and-so. Aren't they saying that they were there? Because without being there, they couldn't have seen it. So it's certainly implied by their testimony that they're saying they were there. Now the second witnesses say to the first ones, you weren't there. Well, witnesses have credibility when they give testimony about events that take place. No one has the credibility of a witness to give testimony about himself. If you had the credibility of a witness to give testimony on yourself, you could never convict two people of doing anything. Two people say they did the crime. The two accused will say we didn't do the crime. It's 2 and 2, hung jury, and it goes out. You'd never be able to convict people of doing crimes. You don't have credibility of testimony when you're giving testimony on your own case. So now what you said comes into effect, but not the way you said it. The first witnesses say, we saw the murder, and implying because we were there. The second set of witnesses say, you weren't there. When the first set of witnesses say back, we were there, they have no credibility because they're giving a statement about themselves. For that, they don't have the credibility of testimony, and therefore the second witnesses win. That's the argument that legally the second witnesses win, even though we don't know who's telling the truth. That would mean that it's a logical rule. Those who oppose, that's the tour, by the way, I'm telling you now is Rav Shamshon for Hirsch. And those who oppose say, you're right. In almost every case, if two witnesses accuse two people of a crime, and they say back, we didn't do it, it's not going to work. Because they have no credibility to give testimony in their own case. So, if two people say that they committed murder, no, we're innocent, that's not going to work. Two say that you stole, and they say we're honest, we didn't steal, that's not going to work. But here, the feature of the first witnesses that's in play is something which is contained in their testimony about the murder, for which they do have credibility. When they say, we saw the murder take place in Times Square, January 5th, 2016, whatever I said, right? They have the credibility of witnesses, they have credibility of testimony to say it, and will convict on the basis of that testimony. Now that testimony itself contains the statement that they were there. This isn't just an external statement, I didn't lie, I didn't steal, I didn't cheat, I didn't commit murder. So the question is, what is the status of implied testimony? Not something that you said, but it was implied by something that you said. You had the credibility of testimony to say what you said. You also have the credibility on the implication. That's where the difference of opinion is turning. The bottom line is, one says that this rule of trusting of accepting the second witness is logical, and the other says not logical. Does it make any difference? So I think it's the Torah who says that it does make a difference. And here's how it would make a difference. Let's suppose the first witnesses give their testimony in 2015. And the second witnesses come 2018, 3 years later. Long time. 2018, they come, they say that the first witnesses were incompetent because they weren't in the right place, but they said they were in the right place. Suppose between 2015 and 2018, in 2017, they gave other testimony. Well, people who are convicted of lying in court are never trustworthy again. So now, the second witnesses in 2018 are telling us that in 2015, the first witnesses lied. Well, I say, now I know that in 2015 they lied, so the testimony they gave in 2017 should be disqualified. But that's only if you're going to take the proof of 2018 as applying to their status in 2015 and use that new status from 2015 forward from 2015 to include everything that happens afterwards. That's called the mafreya. The testimony in 2018 changes it reveals to us the real character of what was going on in 2015. That's if it's logical. If there's a legal reason to prefer the second witnesses, then I have a legal reason to treat the first witnesses as liars. Then it's quite logical to go back and say, what happened in 2017, according to the law, they're liars, as of 2015, and in that case, what they said in 2017 is invalid. But if it isn't logical, the Torah said, treat them as liars. No reason that you can understand, no logic that you can understand, simply telling you, treat them as liars. Then it's open to say, okay, the Torah said something new, we never would have dreamt of this, treat them as liars. From when? Maybe from the time that you found out they were liars. That's the time at which you start treating them as liars. That'll be from 2018 on. Now that's called Mikana Lahabel Mafreya, because you're using your changed understanding of what happened in 2015 to determine how they should be treated from 2018 on. So it's retroactive. Mafreya means retroactive. It's retroactive, having consequences starting from the time in which the retroactive statement becomes known, not starting from the retroactive time where the event took place. That's called, Mikana Lahaba means forward in time, and Lamafreya means retroactive. So here it means forward consequences of a retroactive determination versus pure retroactive, which means you made a retroactive determination of what really happened, and from then on, the consequences are changed. This is all worked out in Jewish law. So now, let's think about Teshuvah. Let's think about what Teshuvah does. A person commits a crime, sometime later, year later, 5 years later, he does Teshuvah. That's somehow supposed to rectify things, make things good, change things. So, can we say that we are changing the past? We saw you can't change the past, you can't change the future. The future is what it is, and the past is what it is. Change the past would mean that you did the crime, but now you didn't do the crime. So then, what do you write in the history book? You can't write them both in the history book, either one or the other. You can't change the past. So one way out is to say, we're going to change your relationship to the past. From now on, you're going to be treated as if the past were different from what it is. It isn't different. It really is what it is. Nothing happened in the past. We're going to treat it as if, only as if it were different. That means you change, but not that the past changed. That would be one way to explain the way in which it gets fixed up. But there's another possibility. For this, I'd like you to take out the blue books. I'll show you something in the verses in Isaiah.
Isaiah?
The Chumash, right? Because it's in the Haftorah for Atanis. Thank you. Oh, here we go. Yeah, this is on page 1233. This is a famous passage from Isaiah to read on fast days, after in the afternoon. Seek Hashem when he can be found, call him when he is near. Let the wicked one forsake his way, and the iniquitous one man his thoughts, and let him return to Hashem, and he will show him mercy. To our God, for he will be abundantly forgiving. Okay, return to Teshuvah, and God will be merciful and forgiving. 4, because. Okay, now we're getting a cause of the previous sentence. Because my thoughts are not your thoughts, and your ways are not my ways, the words of Hashem. As high as the heavens are over the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. Really? What's it got to do with it? I'm telling you, do Teshuvah, return to Hashem. Hashem will be merciful and forgiving. Because we're not on the same page, guys. We're just out of touch. His ways and thoughts are not our ways and thoughts. So what? What's it got to do with his being forgiving? 4, another because. Just as the rain and snow descend from heaven and will not return there, unless it waters the earth and causes it to produce and sprout, and gives seed to the sower and food to the eater. Just as the rain comes from heaven and does what I want it to do, so shall my word that emanates from my mouth, it shall not return to me unfulfilled, unless it will have accomplished what I have desired and brought success to where I sent it. So what? What has that got to do with my thoughts and your ways being different? And what have both of them got to do with my forgiving you? So now, let's face another problem about the past. Here's Philip. Philip has firebombed my car. Because Philip belongs to a certain political persuasion where people who disagree with you have to be wiped out. And I won't mention which persuasion it is, chas v'shalom. You'll just have to guess on your own on the basis of your knowledge of contemporary events. And he's firebombed my car, and they catch him, and they put him in jail. 6 months later, there's a hearing, a trial, and I'm there, and Philip says, I have to beg your forgiveness. I was swept up in the rhetoric and the poetry and the drugs and politics of this group, and we were taught to destroy property and so on and so on. But I've been undergoing psychotherapy and political education, and I now abhor what I did and abhor what I was believing, and my life has changed. I'm going to be an honest, productive member of society from now on, and I hope that you'll forgive me. That's interesting. I didn't expect that. What shall I do? I think my response is going to be this. It's wonderful to hear about your progress, and I'm very happy to be at your future. Pay for my car! What about my car? Hello? You destroyed my car. Good. You'll be a nice guy from now on. What about the damage you did? I think there's a reasonable claim there. Morally speaking, Indeed, if you want to test whether he really has turned over a good leaf, and he abhors what he did, he should make it good. Okay. Suppose he did something that can't be overdone, can't be undone, can't be changed. Suppose he killed somebody. Doesn't he remain guilty? Isn't it true that nothing he does now can excuse him of that guilt? What if somebody said, well, we have a system, and in our system, we just ignore the past guilt and we go on from now on? I think you'd say, excuse me, that's not the way morality works. That, I think, is part of what Isaiah is saying here. Because Baruch Hu is promising exactly that. Return to Hashem, He will forgive, and He will repair, He'll show mercy, and you won't be tied down to the historical consequences of what you did. Here it's not a question of having a concept of how shall I treat you. That's what Mikan Lahabel Mafreya does. It gives you a concept of saying what you're doing. The question is whether what you're doing is morally right, morally appropriate. So, here, the message of Yeshayahu is this. I'm telling you, do Teshuvah, and all of your connection to the past events is going to be wiped out. You don't understand that. You don't understand that. You can't agree with it morally. It doesn't fit the way you think what justice is. I know that I created you. I created you with your thoughts. But my thoughts are not your thoughts, and your ways are not my ways. Mine are as high as heaven over yours, and therefore, I know that you don't understand it, and I'm taking that into account by telling you that it's going to happen anyway, even though you don't understand it. That's step 2. And step 3 is, why? Because I created a world to succeed. And without this built in, it won't succeed. Without this built in, it won't succeed. And therefore, it has to be just like the rain and the snow come from heaven, and they give moisture to the earth and promote plant growth, and they don't re-evaporate until they've done what I've sent them to do. So this principle that I have works, and it works to preserve the world, and I put it in the world so that my world shall be successful. That means when we think about it in moral terms, we can't grasp it because it's designed to be above the concept of morality that we use. Yeah.
So meaning even if you're in a situation in which there will be certain sins that we consider will damage the person by doing Teshuvah towards that person, and yet the words of Hashem are telling us that we should do it. Like even if we think it might hurt the other person to remember that.
Wait a second. We didn't say anything about other people. We did not say one word about other people. He says, return to me.
Okay.
In Isaiah, it says, return to me. There are conditions that deal with other people, but we didn't say anything about it. So we can leave it on the side for now. Yeah.
I hear that this lashon could apply to these kind of principles, but it also sounds like it's talking about the ones who are given the option to, or are given the opportunity to do tshuva. It sounds like from the language, and so shall my word that emanates from my mouth, it shall not return to me unfulfilled unless it will have accomplished what I desired and brought success where I sent it. It sounds like he's telling us there has to be tshuva because the individuals who are committing tshuva, who are doing tshuva, have a purpose that they need to fulfill. And if they don't fulfill it, then my purpose for creation, as you said, won't manage to take off.
Oh, see, does it bear that reading? I don't think so. Let me think for a second. Does it bear that reading? That the purpose is fulfilled by doing? But there's no obvious barrier to that. The middle statement says that what I have told you in the first statement sounds to you illogical. What you're talking about isn't illogical.
I know.
So, but then it doesn't sound like that's what the words are saying.
But it's not that, well, I don't think that what Hashem does is illogical, it's just beyond our logic. I'm sorry.
Come on.
I'm in trouble.
That's not what's going on here, right? Yeshai is saying you don't understand it. He's saying, and that's what God says. I know you don't understand it. Doesn't fit your logic, But I'm telling you that my logic is above your logic, right? That agrees with what you said, but it's not an objection anymore, right? And I'm telling you that this principle has to be in the world, otherwise the world will not succeed in accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish. But it remains illogical in your terms, because you think when a person does something, he ought to make good on the damage that he did, and sometimes that's impossible. So then it sounds like he's going to stay guilty.
Well, it's that there's what in my terms is that there's a higher purpose that person has, which trumps any damage that they did.
But
And
that's
so it has to be that they can do tshuva because the purpose that they've been given overcomes almost anything which they
what
can
about
do.
my car? Higher person trumps. Oh, that sounds very nice in philosophy, but I want him to pay for my car.
I can give an example. So it might be that you wanted to pay your car, but if you wanted to pay for your car, then his tshuva, his intent to turn his life around, will be completely destroyed and abrupted because the payment that you're going to extract out of him is too much for him. So there has to be this principle which rescues him from the soul interaction where you are justified to ask for your payment. Because there's a larger picture, we have to say no to you in terms of extracting payment out, because otherwise then his tshuva will be destroyed potentially.
Yeah, okay, but then you're not using the principles of morality. You're trumping the principles of morality, and you're saying to Gottleib, too bad you lost the car. Live with it. I mean, that's not the. You have to trump it with something else. But that's what Isaiah is saying. You're looking at it in moral terms. God describes himself as just and righteous and well, just. So it needs, according to the understanding of justice, it's not going to work. Yeah.
Just a clarification. Is the point in Rabbi, is it coming from the fact that God relates to time differently, or that God's morality is different, or that God isn't bound by logic? I'm not too sure which of the three you're saying it's coming from.
None of them. It doesn't have to do with time. It doesn't have to do with. It's not that God isn't bound by logic. It's that. That's a whole subject. Whether God is bound by logic or isn't bound by logic, it's a whole subject, which I've done a number of times. It's that God says, I have a rule, and your concepts, the way you use them, are concepts which will see that what I'm doing is not appropriate. And I'm telling you I'm doing it anyway, because it's an investment in the success of the whole creation. You can ask the question again. So who says your creation should succeed? If it's built on injustice, why should we be committed to succeeding? It's got to be more than just that it'll frustrate the creation.
He has the real
So-
justice, not me.
Oh, then, and real justice will be butterflies and marmalade, because we don't know what justice is. Come on, we've been through that. That's absolute no out. Because Baruch Hu wrote these words for us to understand. Can't be that he means something by justice we don't know. Otherwise, the words he's just shooting himself in the foot. No, so it's that given the consciousness that we have a grasp of a certain thing, and there's another way of looking at the same thing with a different set of concepts. When science changes with a revolution, it substitutes new concepts. When you go to Aristotelian science, Newtonian science, force isn't the same as force, and mass isn't the same mass, and motion isn't the same motion, acceleration isn't the same acceleration. They all get different definitions. So you look at the old phenomena with brand new concepts, and you can't categorize them in different ways. So he's saying the concepts you have are the ones that I gave you, and that certainly will tell you the principle I'm using is an unjust principle, and you'll think of that as a complaint. And I'm telling you, I'm doing it anyway because my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. Not that there aren't thoughts. Not that thoughts don't count. I have different thoughts. And from a different perspective, like someone who knows relativity, looking back at Newton, at Newton and saying, simultaneity everywhere in the universe? Absolute simultaneity? Either have at the same time or didn't have at the same time? That's just not the right way to talk. Because simultaneity doesn't work that way. Time doesn't work that way. Okay? So that's a way of having a different concept, looking back and saying, yes, your concepts are contradictory. They don't fit the world. The world doesn't work that way. But that's what Isaiah is saying. I know how you think. I know how it looks to you. And I'm telling you that it isn't so. And I'm telling you that the world stands on it. Now, this is the source, a source, or an idea which I don't think people question it enough. Our sources say that Teshuvah is absolute. Teshuvah is absolute. Ain't never omer b'fnei Teshuvah. Person does Teshuvah, that always works. So much so, you have the famous case of Pharaoh, where according to Maimonides, God hardened Pharaoh's heart because what Pharaoh has done has to be punished. And if he'll do Teshuvah, he won't be punished. So therefore, God stops him from doing Teshuvah, so he'll be able to punish him. So first of all, you say, so he'll be able to? Come on, he can do what he wants. The answer to that question is, yes, it's true, he can do what he wants, but you don't know what he wants. He wants Teshuvah to be the top of the tree. He wants Teshuvah to be the most powerful force. That's what he wants. He decided that. Given that he's decided that he wants Teshuvah to be all-powerful, then, in order to guarantee that he can punish Pharaoh, he's got to stop him from doing Teshuvah. It's not as if something holds him back. His own decision has consequences for what he does. But then the question will be, why should Teshuvah be the top of the tree? Why should that be the most important principle? Why not say, Teshuvah is useful for transgressions up to a certain level, but when transgressions get too serious, too severe, from that level on, even if he does Teshuvah, he gets punished anyway. That's certainly a consistent system. Could have done it that way. What we're being told by Isaiah is God wants Teshuvah to be the most powerful force. Nothing stands in the way of Teshuvah. That is to say, if you do Teshuvah, it always works. Rambam's words are, Teshuvah is a tris b'fnei paranias. Teshuvah is like a wall protecting a person from any punishment. That being the case, the only way to guarantee punishment is to stop someone from doing Teshuvah. That's what Isaiah says. Because Teshuvah, my world depends upon Teshuvah. The Gemara Pesachim says 5 things were created before the creation of the world. They were created before they were created. That's really good. That's a good trick if you can do it. It means the whole creation depends upon these things. Nothing could continue without these things. And one of them is Teshuvah. Now, some people explain it, Ein Adam Tzadik Ba'aretz Asher Ya'atov Lo Yechta. There's no person righteous in the world who will do good and not fail. Everyone will fail. Okay, there's the Gemara in Shabbos, the Tosfos over there, and there's the Pnei Yehoshua and the Marsha over there. That's for the aficionados who know what I'm talking about. But so if it's true that everyone is going to fail here and there, that being the case, it has to be Teshuvah for it to be possible for a person to come out of the world clean. You don't leave the world a failure if you made a mistake. You leave the world a failure if you made a mistake and didn't rectify it. You can leave the world a complete success even if you fail, because there's a way of rectifying it. But the rectification has to be perfect. It has to wipe it out. And that's what Isaiah is saying, and that's what we find hard to understand, morally speaking. So, even though we're not changing the past, I wouldn't put that beyond the divine either, because one could say we don't understand that either. But we're not changing the past, we're changing the future consequence of the past. We're doing that, but not when it's victimizes someone and he's not compensated for the victimization. And the idea of victimization, if you stretch it, if you think about it logically, covers almost every case. Very interesting fact in Jewish law: if somebody steals something and he gives it back, that's the end of the story. What about the fact that in the meantime he didn't have the use of it? Not rectifying that. Maybe he had to rent one, stole his car. So he had to rent the car in the meantime. He didn't have to pay the rental. It's a groma ben zikin. So that's a little tricky to do that, let alone when someone commits murder. But there's almost always consequences. What about his pain and suffering? I lost this. Somebody stole it from me. Where is it? especially if a person blames himself. I'm always losing things. I'm not paying attention. I'm not a careful person. What's the matter with me? Why am I like this? And you drive him into that because you deprive him of it. He doesn't know that you did it. So that means the case is going to be, in almost all cases, there's going to be some unrepaired injustice that was caused. And we have to understand that by doing tshuva, everything is set straight. So the person can go into the world to come with no liabilities. No liabilities. It's a very large idea. And the Torah testifies here, because Baruch Hu says, without that the world can't succeed. That's, yeah.
You know where, outside of the Haftorah, do you know where in the Torah it also mentions tshuva?
The book of Deuteronomy, about 6 times. Shavta ad Hashem Elokecha. If you like, I can find a few for you. There's one at least one towards the end, maybe 2. Now there's a little bit of a problem, because the word in the Torah is a future tense word, and future tense words have 2 meanings. They can either mean it will happen or a command to do it. And that's Machlekes Rambam and the Ramban. But yeah, here it is. Oh, it's in this. Yeah. Yeah, so here's one place. Chapter 30, verses 1 and 2. Okay, this. mean, there are a bunch of other places. That's one, and there are many other places. Okay, I'm not finding them at the moment, but there's two verses. There's a bunch of other places in Dvarim where it talks about doing tshuva. V'shavta. So that's something that now we're in the 3 weeks and we're thinking about the Churban, the destruction of the temple, and the losses that we suffered and continue to suffer. And Teshuvah is a national project, and it's also an individual project. And it can work, can help a person's individual circumstances, even if the nation as a whole doesn't participate. Not only that, but an individual's tshuva can help influence the area around him, even without influencing other people to do tshuva. It can influence the area around him that things should go better. It's like if all the water is running downhill, and that means that water is being sapped from the higher areas. So if you put an up current in the down current, then you slow the down current down and they push something up. If you put an up current outside the down current, at least some water is going up the hill, and will be there for the people at the top of the hill. So it's not as if you have to change somebody else in order for your tshuva to have an effect on the circumstances. Even an individual gesture has an effect on the circumstances. And tshuva, like many mitzvahs, is a piecemeal mitzvah. You can do it one thing at a time, or you can subdivide the problem that you're dealing with into subsections and deal with them one at a time. Any movement forward on the grounds that I want to serve Kodesh Baruch Hu better is valid movement. Whether it counts as actually fulfilling the mitzvah of tshuva or not doesn't deprive it of its value as a part of doing tshuva. Every part of doing tshuva, every gesture of doing tshuva is recognized. Even if it doesn't have all the full effects, it's recognized. To the extent, now the Gemara mentions a case, a very bitter case, and the Rambam brings it. Hatoivel v'sheretz biyado. A sheretz is one of 8 families of lizard-like creatures. If they're dead, they contaminate a person. So this guy's going to the mikveh. The mikveh is how you free yourself from contamination. He's going to the mikveh, holding on to the dead sheretz. Really? What's happening there? I mean, when he's underwater, what's going on? Well, the dead sheretz is defiling him while he's underwater. So superficially, the Gemara uses this as an example of utter futility. The purpose of the mikveh is to make you tahor, and you're holding on to the dead sheretz, and it's making you tummy, making you defiled while you're going to the mikveh. One of the commentators on the Rambam says, who are we talking about here? An insane person? Why is he doing that? He would only be going to mikveh because he knows the rules. And he also knows the rules that if he's holding out the sheretz, it doesn't work. So why is he wasting his time? This commentator, I don't remember who it was, said because he wants to be tahor, wants to be pure. That's not zero. That's not zero. Wanting to be, hoping to be, shows a strand of your inner character that someone who's blasé and uninterested doesn't have. And that can be a cause for Kodesh Baruch Hu treating the person better. So even that wanting, you had that expression, I think in English, that the way to hell is paved for regrets, or good intentions, but with regrets. As if to say, what good are regrets if you don't change? That's wrong. That's wrong. Regrets show the kind of person that you are, what you're hoping for, what you feel. Like, for example, a person who's a heavy smoker, and he's not an addict. That's much worse than a person who's an addict. Addicts typically hate themselves, and they wish they were different. They try types of rehabilitation. This guy just smokes. He's give it up. He's satisfied with it. That's much worse degradation, personally, than someone who's doing it, and at least at present, he can't help it, or he isn't helping it, and he wishes he could get out of it. So this person who is Tevel v'Sheres B'Yadav, now the Nimshal, that's really a mashal, a parable. What it's referring to is someone who admits what he's done wrong, says to God, I know I've done it wrong, I know I'm wrong, what I did is I've done it wrong, but he hasn't resolved to change. So the superficial approach is to say, if he doesn't, if he hasn't resolved to change, he doesn't really mean that it's wrong. If he really meant that it was wrong, he'd be saying, I'm going to change. Not necessarily. He may believe that he can't do it. He might even be right. But even if he's wrong, that's not the same as someone who's unconcerned. I met a guy when I was living in Baltimore in the 70s. We had ethnic fairs in the fairgrounds. 1 week in the summer was the Jewish fair. So all sorts of Jewish exhibits, as you can imagine. People from the frum community went down because there were always missionaries there. So we talked to the missionaries to keep them from talking to people who might be affected by their talking to them. Yeah. And some interesting times. I met one Reformed Jew there, talking to him, and he looks very self-satisfied. He's doing okay. So I said to him, do you have any faults? He says, sure, Rabbi. Of course I have faults. Everybody has faults. So I said, well, what are you doing to improve? Rabbi, improve? Listen, I eat well. I sleep well. I accept myself as I am. Boy, that made me irritated. How am I going to get to this guy? You have children? Yeah, I have a son who's 12. I said, imagine that the police bring him home, catching him stealing from the local store during school hours. Truancy and stealing. And when you confront him and say, what? My son stealing and skipping school? He says, yeah, Dad, I skip school and I steal, but don't worry, I eat well, I sleep well, I accept myself as I am. Would you be satisfied with that answer? Would you be happy with that answer? At which point he remembered a very pressing engagement and broke off the conversation. Now, this illustrated to me something I heard from my Rabbi, but I didn't understand it when he said it. Some people who readily admit their faults are very far from doing Teshuvah. This guy had no hesitation in admitting his faults, on the grounds that everybody has faults, and he said he's very far from doing Teshuvah. I thought, since admitting your faults is part of Teshuvah, so he's already on the road to doing Teshuvah. No, it's not always so. That's much worse than a person who says, I know it's wrong, and I wish I didn't do it, and I'm trying, and sometimes I succeed, but most of the time I don't, and I'm hoping to be better. Take, for example, getting angry at your children. That injures them. That injures them. And the person knows it. And he thinks, it's not good that I'm like this. And I really wish I could change. Just that when a kid does that, I lose it. That's much better than a person says, yeah, kids get anger, that's what they need. Need some anger and I'll give it to them. He'll outgrow it, I outgrew it, he has to outgrow it. That's much worse. Much worse. So any fraction of Teshuvah that you do is a step forward, it's appreciated, and it will be compensated, and it helps for you and helps for the surroundings in general. Yeah.
I mean, so in certain cases, let's say we go to a past which has a past, meaning it's the future of a previous past, which is the source, which is symbol like produced many past, which you also regret. So what's like the, if you go, let's say, to the source, like sometimes we don't know how from a little thing the opening can become tremendous. So
Well, that's true. That's certainly true. I think Rabbi Yonah really bases some of what he says on that. My example is, two partners are in a partnership, in a business partnership, and one is stealing from the other, which happens. And then 8 months later, he feels bad about what he did, and he says to the guy, I'm the one who caused you the loss of money. I'm sorry, here's the money back. So he caused the loss of money, and he gave the money back. What he doesn't know is that his partner had a gambling problem. He's married. Several times he gambled away a lot of money in the family. This time he got therapy, and this time his wife said to him, okay, the next time you gamble, I'm leaving you. Money was missing from the account. Money was missing from his income. Where's the money, Fred? I don't know. That's what you said the last 3 times when you were gambling. You're gambling, I'm leaving you. Oh, so he lost his marriage. Aha, but now his kids grow up without a father, and then the kids get involved in terrible things because they don't have a father. Was he just stealing money? He did a lot more than stealing money. We don't realize the consequences of what we do, the long-range consequences of what we do. One of the reasons Rabbi Yonah says that regret is a lifetime project, because as your life goes on, you understand far better what you did, what the real consequences were, and then you have to take that into account when you think, I regret what I did. That's why, according to Rabbi Yonah, Teshuvah is a lifetime project. Yeah, anyway, that's, yeah.
As to why when you experience the loss that you're not recouped for, so you're stolen from, and the time in which you don't have the object is a loss as well, we said before that when you do tshuva, you improve the circumstances for everyone potentially. So maybe there's some good in you doing tshuva which helps compensate the person for the in-between wrong that you did them. That's part of why it evens out.
That's interesting. I don't know. It's an interesting idea. I haven't heard such a thing, but I suppose it's a possibility. Things from now on will go better than they would have gone otherwise, and therefore you're compensated for the thing that you lost. Maybe. It's a reasonable idea because the Kodesh Baruch Hu does keep an accounting of justice. So, nice idea.